Finally, no more masks on planes.
Mr. Reagan.
The CDC mask mandate for air travel and trains has been ruled unlawful. Finally! But you know what? I'm a little annoyed by this. I just flew from LA to Honolulu and had to wear a dang mask the whole flight. You couldn't have ruled on that last week? I'm kidding, of course. Despite the misfortune of my timing, I am overjoyed by this news. The Biden administration is expressing, quote, disappointment with the ruling, and yet they've quickly capitulated, and the Biden-run TSA has stated that the TSA will not enforce its security directives and emergency amendment requiring mask use on public transportation and transportation hubs at this time. Now, I imagine that this prompt capitulation probably had something to do with the fact that Democrat candidates are poised to get slaughtered in the 2022 midterms. And the administration is looking for anything to try to mitigate the inevitable damage. This is a story that I caught from Zero Hedge, one of my go-to news sources, great site. The mandate that's been ruled against was enacted in February of 2021, shortly after Biden was sworn in as president. According to the FAA, there have been over 7,000 incidents reported of unruly passengers on airplanes since this idiotic mandate was enacted. 70% of which, 70, involved the masking rules. So these mask mandates have clearly caused a lot of harm, and if you believe that masks provide the same level of protection that I believe that they provide, well, then they've done a lot more harm than good. Now, despite the CDC's compliance with this ruling, the Biden administration is presenting a kind of toothless protest.
So this is obviously a disappointing decision. The CDC continues recommending wearing a mask in public transit. As you know, this just came out this afternoon. So right now, the Department of Homeland Security, who would be implementing, and the CDC are reviewing the decision. And of course, the Department of Justice would make any determinations about litigation.
But you know what? I think this is all just talk. I don't think that they have any intention to challenge this. I mean, unless they're complete morons. And, let's not put anything past this administration. But yeah, they know that the midterms look really dire for Democrats, and they need to do whatever they can to help Democrat candidates. But at the same time, they brainwashed Democrat voters into thinking that COVID masks are divine objects and a symbol of following the science. So they can never really just go along with any kind of drawing back of mask-related rules. I think that the brainwashed cultist voters would, at this point, see this as some kind of a betrayal. So yeah, this is why I think they're pretending to be upset about the ruling. But here's the big question. Are the airlines going to comply with this new court ruling? Or are they going to continue to mandate the face huggers?
What the hell is that?
So are the airlines going to comply? The answer to that in one moment. First, of course, I have to sell you something. For years now, people have been setting up a little contest between crypto and gold, but that's like comparing trucks with SUVs. Both carry stuff and both travel from A to B, but they do different jobs. Gold's job is to keep the value of your money safe and to preserve its value. And since Ukraine and the oil and inflation crises, gold has done a brilliant job compared to stocks and other investments. So if you're worried about what's going on right now, and who isn't, just talk to the experts at Noble Gold about precious metals IRAs for your retirement. They'll put you straight on your options, and they'll hold your hand through the entire setup process. And this month, for any qualified IRA, you'll get an incredible 3-ounce silver American Virtue coin completely free as a thank you. When they sent me this, they send me coins every once in a while. Valeria flipped out. So far, this is her favorite coin, and I have to say, I agree. This thing is pretty nice. So call 877-646-5347 right now to find out more, or visit noblegoldinvestments.com. That's noblegoldinvestments.com. So are the airlines going to comply? Well, it looks like yes. This court ruling has apparently come as a real relief to the airline industry. According to Zero Hedge, both United and Alaska Airlines immediately rescinded their mask rules on their flights. And Ed Bastian, the CEO of Delta, was just asked about the mandate by the Washington Post, and his response speaks volumes.
I think lifting the mask mandate will be one step
towards reestablishing civility and normal behavioral patterns on board the aircraft as well as in the airports. Many of the situations you refer to, David, stem from someone having an issue with a mask, another customer objecting to the way someone else is wearing the mask, or the response to one of our airport agents or flight attendants asking a customer to keep their mask in a better condition and to wear it properly.
I mean, this guy clearly wanted the stupid mask mandate gone. And, I'm not sure he can state that outright, because delusional Democrats who adore the bacteria-infested facehuggers would probably boycott Delta if he did. But you can see that he blames the stupid mandate for a lot of unruly behavior on the airlines. And I'd like to say the unruly behavior is isolated exclusively to the passengers, but I don't think that it is. We've seen several videos of unruly stewardesses abusing their authority with this mask nonsense, and even claiming authority that they don't have at all.
I'll wear this, but if she can give me a reason, like, that I have to turn it off, like, is there a reason?
Because
like,
it's offensive.
It's offensive?
It can be to some people, so we're not gonna go back and forth. Just go ahead and put the blue one on, okay?
Okay, so my mask is offensive.
That's fine. Do it.
This is not America anymore.
But most of these flight attendants are stuck in a bad position, because even if they don't want to enforce these idiotic rules, they have to by law. So I do have a lot of sympathy for these flight attendants. But look, bottom line, the good flight attendants will no longer be forced to nag everyone, and the evil flight attendants, well, they've got to stop nagging everyone. But the fact that this Delta CEO appears to be happy about this is great news to me, because Delta is the only airline that I fly. It's the only good airline in the country, in my experience. And I'm going to be flying back to LA next month on Delta, and I do not want to wear a dang mask on that long flight back to LA. Unsurprisingly, the judge who made this ruling has been raked over the coals by Democrat voters because she released us from our little mask prisons. This judge is ironically a woman, which is one of the victim groups that the left claims to protect. But anyway, her name is Catherine Kimball Mitzel, and she has three qualities that the left seems to find fit to criticize. She's white, she's young, and she's a Trump appointee. So they're basically saying that she's unqualified and biased and white. But from what I've read, she's a very impressive person, even for a white. She was nominated for a federal appointment only 8 years after starting her law career. Ordinarily, the bar doesn't make qualification assessments until a person has practiced law for at least 12 years. And in a letter opposing her nomination, the American Bar Association actually praised Mitzel by saying, quote, "She has a very keen intellect, a strong work ethic, and an impressive resume." And they said her integrity and demeanor are not in question. It's funny that the qualifications of the Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson were never questioned, despite being nominated openly because of her race and gender. And yet this judge, also a woman, is raked over the coals simply for ruling in a way that the left doesn't like. A lack of consistency is, well, quite frankly, expected of Democrats at this point. What is it that the folks say? If the Democrats didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have any standards at all? I think it's something like that, right? So I looked into Mitzel's ruling to see if it seemed naive or biased or whatever, as leftists are suggesting. And to be honest, her rationale for ruling as she's done here, it's some of the most sensible stuff I've heard from a government official in a very long time. Here's the summary that's currently on Wikipedia. Mitzel argued that the 1944 statute that gives the federal government authority to combat communicable disease as part of sanitation efforts was being misapplied because sanitation solely referred to measures that clean something, and masks do not clean anything. She also argued that travelers were being restricted from freedom to travel based on an arbitrary condition, and that long-standing case law surrounding the right to enforce detention and quarantine by the government was applicable only to those who were actually sick. Imagine that. Quarantine only applies to those who are actually sick. Who would have thunk it? Now, besides the upcoming election, the CDC has a secondary motivation not to contest this court ruling, but rather to quietly go along. Because the CDC recently admitted that masks, cloth masks in particular, how do I put this? It's strange that even after the CDC changes its position, I still have to be careful how I say things on YouTube, because YouTube's policy isn't actually to follow the government guidelines, but rather to follow whatever rules they want. and their rules say that nobody's allowed to say anything bad about our precious masks. But the CDC basically came out and said that cloth masks might not be the super shield barrier that many seem to believe that they are. And in fact, they may not be anything like that at all. Honestly, look into it. It's pretty fascinating. It kind of went under the radar, wasn't reported. But yeah, the CDC came out and basically said, yeah, they're not as good as you might think. Basically, the CDC has admitted that cloth masks, in terms of functionality, well, maybe we should start classifying them as decorative. And if you'd like to think of them less as an object of medical protection and more of a fashion accessory, well, that's your choice. Feel free to think of them in that way if that's what you want. And you know what? It would not be the worst way of seeing things. So yeah, I have to speak about this kind of thing in this weird nebulous language because, I don't know how willing YouTube is to let go of their obsession over the mask thing. They seem to think that masks are the ultimate weapon against COVID, and if you dare say anything against them, you're the devil and you must be deplatformed. It is completely insane. Now, I suspect that this has nothing to do with their commitment to public health or combating misinformation as they insist, but rather has everything to do with identifying and deplatforming conservatives. It's a clever little trick. Oh, conservatives disagree with us about something? Well, let's pretend that that one thing has been confirmed by settled science to be dangerous disinformation and that it endangers public health. And then whenever any of them express this idea, we can deplatform them without any public backlash because we're believably trying to, quote, protect public health. I mean, it is very clever and it does seem to work. If only Elon Musk would buy YouTube. Well, perhaps I can't speak freely, but I can at least breathe freely. So thank you to that judge who made that ruling. You are awesome. Now, there is going to be a sizable portion of the population who are going to say that this is a tragedy, and they're going to insist that everyone should wear masks forever.
I listen to the little voice in my head that doesn't really follow 100% what they tell me because they keep changing it.
Yep.
So if I go on the subway, if I go in a bus, if I go into the theater, if I go into, where else would I go?
A crowded spot.
A crowded place,
crowd.
I would wear a mask, and I might do that indefinitely.
People just aren't great people. And that's just the bottom line. Americans just aren't great to each other. We just aren't. And so when it comes to things like flying,
I agree.
the
You
mask
need to have the
mandate is
mask.
supposed to be lifted April 18th. I don't want to get on a plane with super spreaders. I don't want to get on a plane with 214 other people that are going to be breathing on me with their COVID breath. I don't want it.
Yeah.
I don't want it. I want the mask. I want the mask.
So you wear it.
Well, okay, you know what? If you want to wear a mask in public for the rest of your life, you are free to do so. There is no law against it. The rest of us, we can finally smile in public. We can laugh, we can eat, we can kiss, and we can finally breathe freely. Now, if we can only get rid of those dang paper straws here in Hawaii. Well, that's it for me. And remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant. It's just that they know so much. That is not so. Good night.
Someone very profoundly once said that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism. And what is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, but total government control and regulation. Well, isn't this the liberal philosophy? The conservative, so-called, is the one that says, less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.